Hello and welcome back to the APUSH History Curriculum for Era 6. In this video, we'll be looking at Topic 6.9, Responses to Immigration in the Gilded Age, because some saw benefits for large numbers of immigrants while others were not so pleased about it. So let's get to it. Not all Americans welcomed the invasion of the masses from abroad. Never mind the fact that nearly all Americans have some sort of immigrant background, either from back in the early colonial period or to more recent early 19th century arrivals, laborers often resented the competition for factory jobs. It was not uncommon for business leaders to hire foreign workers for significantly less pay, sometimes even recruiting them straight from Europe, and to also use them as strikebreakers, called scabs by the unions. Union leaders also feared that factories would simply fire workers who were trying to unionize and replace them with lesser-paid immigrants. Many religious leaders were also alarmed at the growing number of non-Protestant believers, especially the increase of Catholics, who had already faced intense discrimination during the earlier waves of immigration from Ireland, and now had large numbers of Catholics from Italy and other European countries coming as well. They feared that Catholics were planning on taking over America, perhaps even politically. Gradually, these nativists lobbied successfully to restrict the flow of immigration. Criminals, contract workers, the mentally ill, anarchists, alcoholics were among groups to be gradually barred from entry by Congress. In 1882, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, barring this ethnic group in its entirety. 25 years later, Japanese immigration would be restricted by executive agreement in the aftermath of the Great San Francisco earthquake, in the Gentleman's Agreement, they called it. These two Asian groups were the only ethnicities to be completely excluded from America. In 1917, Congress required the passing of a literacy test to gain admission. And finally, in 1924, though we'll talk about it more later, the door would be shut to millions by placing an absolute cap on new immigrants based on country of origin. That cap was based on the U.S. population of 1890 and was therefore designed to favor the previous immigrant groups. Some of those in opposition to unrestricted immigration subscribed to a theory called social Darwinism. They were applying elements of biological Darwinism to society. They argued that in nature, the strong rose to the top and the weak fell to the bottom, failing to thrive and failing to survive. Social Darwinists believed that these new immigrants were inferior and therefore deserved their own poverty. They felt that any attempt to help the poor was like helping a too weak animal to survive, and that it would in time weaken the gene pool, making everyone weaker. This line of thinking also supported a racial theory that non-white races were somehow inferior to the standard American white person, and even Irish immigrants were lumped into this group, as many social Darwinists believed that the Irish were a separate race. Of course, this did lead some in America to think this was too extreme and not in keeping with Christian values, which is why they developed the idea of social gospel, providing benefits for the good of society as a whole rather than individuals. At least that's what men like Andrew Carnegie believed, and can be seen in how he gave away a large portion of his wealth. But we'll talk more about that later on. As part of this social gospel movement, though, many middle and upper-class women began to take part in efforts to assist the poor amongst city dwellers, often immigrants. They did so through the establishment and running of what were called settlement houses. A settlement house was a home where destitute immigrants could go when they had nowhere else to turn. Settlement houses provided family-style cooking, lessons in English, and tips on how to adapt to American culture. The first settlement house opened in 1889 in Chicago, Hull House. Its organizer, Jane Addams, intended Hull House to serve as a prototype for others, and by 1900 there were nearly 100 settlement houses in the nation's big cities. Jane Addams herself would be considered the founder of an entirely new profession, social work. Immigrant and poor children, often served by these settlement houses, would benefit because of a renewed desire to improve public education, something that these settlement houses often helped to expand on. Church leaders and modern liberals within this movement were concerned for the welfare of children. They believed that a strong education was not only appropriate, but an inalienable right owed to all. Furthermore, critics of child labor practices wanted longer mandatory school years. After all, if a child was in school, he or she would not be in a factory. And a settlement house could provide a good pathway to helping those individuals adapt to the United States so that they wouldn't fall behind. That about covers what you need to know for topic 6.9, responses to immigration in the Gilded Age. Be sure to keep up with your reading, and I'll catch you in the next video.